They hid her face from mirrors, but he saw beauty in every scar the fire left behind. Adelaide Thorne polished silver in the abandoned east wing of the Ashford estate, her burned face hidden from the family she served. 23 years old, 12 years scarred, a lifetime invisible. The fire had taken half her face when she was 11. The Ashfords kept her employed out of guilt, but locked her away like shameful cargo, working only night shifts when guests wouldn't see her. "You work in darkness," a voice said. Adelaide spun. A man stood in shadows, tall, dressed in black, with eyes that reflected candlelight like a wolf's. He moved with unnatural grace. "I'm Lucian Corvus," he said. "I've watched this house 3 nights, waiting to see if the stories were true, that the Ashfords keep an angel locked away. I'm no angel, just a burned servant. I see survival." He stepped closer, and Adelaide noticed his impossible pallor, his too still breathing. "Every scar is proof you chose life when death was easier. That's not monstrous, it's transcendent." He produced a mirror. "Look at yourself through my eyes." Adelaide hadn't seen her reflection in 12 years. Trembling, she took the mirror and saw her scarred face. But beside her, where Lucian stood, the glass showed only empty air. No reflection. Understanding crashed through her. The pale skin, the predatory grace, the missing reflection. "What are you?" she whispered. "Someone who recognizes beauty when the world calls it broken." Lucienne met her gaze steadily. "Someone who's walked in darkness 300 years, waiting for someone who understands that scars are illumination, not disfigurement." He extended his hand. "The Ashfords return at dawn. You can remain their hidden shame or step into different darkness, one where you'll never be invisible again." Adelaide looked at her scarred hands, then at his pale, perfect ones. For the first time in 12 years, she chose herself. She took his hand. "Subscribe if you believe even the broken can shine in the right darkness." Lucian led Adelaide through secret passages to a hidden conservatory, glass walls catching moonlight, furniture draped like sleeping ghosts. He'd been living here 200 years, long before the Ashfords claimed the estate. "You're a vampire," Adelaide said, testing the word. "Yes, and I feed only from willing sources. Those who offer freely, who understand consent, matters more than hunger." He poured dark liquid from a decanter, blood, thick and red. "I won't lie about what I need to survive, but I'll never take without permission." He told her about Catherine, the vampire who made him. How she'd glamored his consent, stolen his choice, left him to wake as a monster alone and horrified. "I swore I'd never create another vampire her way. If I ever offer transformation, it'll be with full knowledge, without manipulation." Adelaide felt the weight of his honesty. The Ashfords touched her with gloved hands, never ate beside her, treated her scars like contagion. But this monster spoke of consent like sacred text. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Your company, your voice, your choice to not be alone with 3 centuries of memories." He met her eyes. "I don't want your blood unless you offer it. I don't want servitude. I want you to decide whether a monster's companionship is worth more than your locked room's safety." Adelaide thought about 12 more years serving people who couldn't look at her. Then she made her choice. "Until dawn," she said. "Show me what freedom tastes like." Lucian's fingers closed gently around hers. "Until dawn. Then you choose what comes next." Lucian's library held centuries of collected wisdom, books bound in materials Adelaide couldn't name, texts in 17 languages, knowledge preserved from empires that no longer existed. "I collect evidence that surviving doesn't make you less worthy," Lucian explained, "that scars are proof of life lived, not ruined." He showed her his journal from his transformation, 3 days of agony, Catherine's cruelty, his horror at becoming undead. "I need you to understand what transformation costs. If you ever choose eternity, you'll know the truth." Adelaide told him her own truth. Sometimes I'm grateful for the fire. It taught me I'm stronger than I look, that I don't need approval to know my worth. But God, I'm tired of being strong alone. Lucian held her while she wept 12 years of accumulated grief. Then he drew her portrait in charcoal, capturing not just her scars, but her strength, the intelligence in her eyes, the beauty in her survival. This is who you are, perfect because you survived, not despite it. Adelaide studied the drawing and felt something crack open in her chest. "What happens at dawn?" she asked. "You choose. Return to your locked room, accept my help leaving, or stay here and let me teach you what it means to be seen completely." Adelaide looked at the library, the portrait, the vampire who spoke of love without requiring perfection. "I choose you," she said, "for as long as you'll have me." Lucian kissed her forehead. "Welcome home, Adelaide Thorne. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Adelaide woke in velvet luxury, Lucian's note beside her. "The house is yours. Explore. I'll wake at sunset." Mrs. Talbot appeared, an elderly woman who'd served Lucian 43 years. She showed Adelaide her own throat scar. "My husband tried to kill me. Master Lucian gave me sanctuary. Now I help others he extends that gift to." She led Adelaide outside into afternoon sunlight. Adelaide hadn't walked in daylight for 12 years. The warmth hit her face like benediction, turning her scars translucent gold. "Master Lucian is lonely," Mrs. Talbot said. "He reads constantly, writes letters to dead people, tends flowers that bloom only at night. He's forgotten what it's like to want a future." Adelaide explored the estate, galleries full of art spanning centuries, conservatories with rare plants, evidence of a life lived in beautiful isolation. At sunset, Mrs. Talbot took her to Lucian's underground chamber. Adelaide watched him wake, violent spasms, eyes gone black with hunger, inhuman sounds tearing from his throat. Every instinct screamed for her to run. But when recognition flickered in his dark eyes, when he rasped, "Get out! Don't want to hurt you," Adelaide took his hand instead. "I'm choosing to be here," she said calmly. "You're safe. I'm safe. Just breathe." Mrs. Talbot handed Adelaide a glass of blood. Adelaide fed it to Lucian herself, watching color return to his skin. Humanity reasserting control over the monster. "You shouldn't have seen that," he whispered. "I needed to see all of you. The hunger, the struggle, the parts you're ashamed of." Adelaide cupped his face. "Because I'm choosing everything, Lucian, not just the poetry." He pulled her close. "Mine. God help us both, but yes, mine." 3 weeks passed. Adelaide learned Lucian's rhythms, his sunset hunger, his careful restraint, his cultivation of night-blooming beauty. They established routines, her days in sunlight, their evenings together, nights of conversation and music, but they never touched beyond casual contact. Chaste, careful, restrained, until Adelaide's patience broke. "Why won't you kiss me?" she demanded. "Really kiss me." "Because I don't trust myself to stop." "I'm not a child. I know my own mind, and I want you." Lucian's control shattered. He kissed her with 3 weeks of desperate restraint finally breaking, fierce, dangerous, edged with hunger. Then he wrenched back, eyes flickering black. "My eyes go dark when hunger rises," he explained, voice strained. "I grip too hard. My breathing becomes controlled. My voice drops. Those are the signs I'm losing control. Then teach me to read them. Let yourself want me." Adelaide extended her hand. "Dance with me." They moved together, Lucian learning he could feel desire without destruction. Adelaide learning his warning signs, the moments he needed space, the boundaries that kept them both safe. By dawn, they lay tangled on the library floor, exhausted and still clothed, but transformed by intimacy. "You make me want things I swore I'd never want again," Lucian whispered. "Hope, future, the possibility I'm more than a monster surviving." "Good. Keep wanting. Keep choosing me." 2 months later, Lucian presented Adelaide with a gift. Mirrors arranged in a circle, each one reflecting her completely, scars and all. "You avoided mirrors 12 years, he said. "Time you saw what I see." Adelaide studied herself from every angle. In the candlelight and gardens, she looked powerful, a survivor, beautiful in her own terrible way. "I'm not afraid anymore," she realized. "You taught me that." "Adelaide, I'm falling in love with you," Lucian confessed. "And that terrifies me, because everyone I've loved has aged and died while I remained frozen." "Then offer me what you've been holding back, the third choice, eternity." "You're not ready. I've had 2 months to consider. I choose it. I choose you. For however long forever lasts." Lucian trembled. "It will hurt. 3 days of agony. And afterward, you'll need to feed. You might kill—" "Then teach me control. I survived fire. I can survive this." "When?" "Tonight. Now." But as they turned to leave, Adelaide saw movement in the mirrors. Something with too many angles, red glowing eyes. The glass exploded. Through the shattered mirrors stepped a woman, beautiful, ancient, eyes like blood. "Hello, Lucian," she purred. "Did you think I'd stay dead forever?" "Catherine." The vampire he'd killed 70 years ago stood impossibly alive in the ruined conservatory. "You can't be here," Lucian whispered. "I staked you. You staked a body, but I've had 70 years to learn resurrection." Catherine's gaze slid to Adelaide. "And who's this scarred pet you're planning to transform? Leave her alone. Everything you love is between us. I made you. You're mine, Lucian." Catherine smiled viciously. "And I won't let you create a companion. Won't let you escape the loneliness I cursed you with." She lunged, not at Lucian, but at Adelaide. Lucian caught her mid-strike, and the vampires collided with inhuman force. They fought too fast for Adelaide to track, blurs of violence and supernatural strength. Catherine pinned Lucian within seconds. "Watch me break him again." Adelaide grabbed a mirror shard and drove it into Catherine's back. Catherine screamed, releasing Lucian. The fight spilled outside as Mrs. Talbot pulled Adelaide to safety, sealing them behind iron doors. Adelaide paced in fury. "I have to help him." "You can't. You're human. Fragile." "Then make me not human." Adelaide's voice turned fierce. "He was going to transform me tonight anyway. I won't sit here useless while he fights the monster who tortured him." She grabbed a knife and ran before Mrs. Talbot could stop her. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. Adelaide paced Mrs. Talbot's quarters, while the old woman worked protection spells over the door, salt lines, iron filings, whispered words in Latin that made the air taste metallic. "How is she alive?" Adelaide demanded, her voice tight with frustration and fear. Lucienne said he staked her, burned her body, scattered the ashes across 3 continents. The master believed her dead. We all did. Mrs. Talbot's hands shook as she poured another line of salt across the threshold. But Catherine was ancient even when she made him. 400 years old, perhaps older. No one knows her true age. Creatures that old have contingencies, hidden hearts buried in consecrated ground, phylacteries bound to living hosts, blood pacts with demons that predate Christianity, ways to cheat true death that most vampires never learn. What does she want? To hurt him. It's all she's ever wanted. Mrs. Talbot paused, her weathered face creased with old grief. She doesn't make vampires for companionship, Miss Adelaide. She makes them for entertainment, watching them struggle with immortality, watching them descend into madness or cruelty, watching them suffer. It's her art form, her twisted gallery of ruined souls. Adelaide thought of Lucian's journal, his words about waking to horror while Catherine laughed. Her stomach churned with rage. I have to help him. You can't. You're human, fragile. She'd snap your neck for sport before you took 3 steps. Mrs. Talbot grabbed Adelaide's shoulders, forcing eye contact. The master has survived 3 centuries. He can survive this, but not if he's distracted trying to protect you. Then make me not human. Adelaide's voice turned fierce, desperate. She grabbed Mrs. Talbot's shoulders in return, matching the old woman's intensity. You've served him 40 years. You must know how transformation works. Do it. Now. Before he comes back broken or dead. Miss Thorne, it's not that simple. He was going to do it tonight anyway. We were ready. I consented. We'd planned everything. The only thing that changed is the timeline. Adelaide's grip tightened. I won't sit here useless while he fights the monster who tortured him. Give me teeth. Give me strength. Give me whatever it takes to stand beside him instead of hiding behind locked doors. Mrs. Talbot searched Adelaide's face and saw immovable determination, the same stubbornness that had survived fire, that had chosen a vampire's love, that refused to be invisible any longer. Even if I knew the complete ritual, which I don't, not fully, transformation requires the master's blood, his intention, his will to share his immortality with you. It's not just blood transfusion. It's a metaphysical binding, soul to soul. Adelaide thought fast, her mind racing through 2 months of accumulated knowledge. Then we get his blood. You said he stores it, right? For feeding between hunts? That's different. Dead blood, preserved blood. It sustains existing vampires but doesn't transform humans. For transformation, you need living blood, freely given, mixed with intention and ancient words that... A crash from above shook the foundations. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, glass shattered in cascading waves. The sound of inhuman screaming, Lucian's voice twisted into something Adelaide barely recognized. She made her decision. Then I'll get it from the source. Adelaide grabbed a knife from Mrs. Talbot's kitchen, silver, because silver seemed appropriate for supernatural circumstances, and ran for the stairs before the old woman could physically stop her. Her feet pounded on stone, taking steps 2 at a time, heart hammering with fear and determination in equal measure. The conservatory was destroyed. Worse than destroyed, desecrated. Glass everywhere, glittering like malicious stars across the floor. Plants torn to shreds, their night-blooming petals scattered like botanical carnage. The furniture Adelaide had sat in just hours ago was reduced to splinters. And in the center of the carnage, Lucian and Catherine circled each other like wolves, both bleeding from wounds that should have been immediately fatal. Catherine's left arm hung at an unnatural angle, bone visible through torn flesh. But even as Adelaide watched, the wound began knitting itself closed, flesh crawling over exposed bone with nauseating efficiency. Lucian's face was a mask of blood, one eye swollen shut, his elegant clothes shredded to reveal deep gashes across his chest and shoulders. They'd been fighting for less than 10 minutes. It looked like they'd been at war for hours. Catherine saw Adelaide first. Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous, filed to points like a shark's. The pet returns. Does she think to save you, Lucian? How precious, how doomed, how deliciously tragic. Lucian's eyes, the one that wasn't swollen shut, met Adelaide's across the wreckage, and she saw terror there. Pure, undiluted terror. Not for himself, but for her. Get back inside. Adelaide. Please, get back inside. But Adelaide was already moving, knife raised high. Not attacking Catherine. She wasn't that foolish, wasn't that naive about the power differential. But running straight to Lucian, pressing the blade's edge to her own wrist hard enough to draw blood. Transform me, she said, loud enough for both vampires to hear. clear, certain, unshakable. Right now, this moment. Give me the strength to fight beside you instead of watching you die protecting me. Adelaide, no. Lucian reached for her, trying to push her away, but he was weakened from the fight, slower than usual. Yes. Adelaide pressed harder, blood welling bright crimson against her pale skin. The scars from the fire made her wrist tissue less sensitive. She'd learned long ago that damaged nerves meant less pain. Your blood for mine. Isn't that how it works? I'm giving you consent and will and every ounce of intention I possess. So give me yours and let me choose this. Let me choose you. Let me choose us surviving instead of you dying heroically while I hide like they've made me hide for 12 years. Catherine's laughter rang through the ruins, high and cruel and delighted. Oh, this is delicious. The scarred girl wants to become a monster. Lucian, you've corrupted her beautifully. Catherine's proud. This is exactly the kind of desperation I fed on when I made you. That beautiful moment when survival matters more than morality. Shut up, Adelaide said, surprising everyone including herself with the venom in her voice. She kept her eyes locked on Lucian. You told me transformation requires consent and will. I'm giving both. I'm literally bleeding for you. Now stop hesitating and save us both, or watch me bleed out while Catherine kills you. Those are your options. Choose. Their eyes locked. Adelaide saw Lucian warring with himself, the overwhelming desire to protect her fighting against the tactical need for alliance, his fear of making her like Catherine battling his knowledge that she'd die if Catherine won this fight. His 300-year commitment to ethical transformation crashing against the reality that ethics were a luxury they couldn't afford right now. Then, something in his expression hardened, resolved, accepted. Lucian bit his own wrist with savage efficiency, fangs tearing through his own flesh, and pressed the bleeding wound to Adelaide's bleeding wrist, their blood mixing in a communion older than any church sacrament. Forgive me, he whispered, his voice breaking. Forgive me for doing this without time, without preparation, without... The pain was instant and overwhelming. Fire in her veins, but worse than the original burning. That fire had been external, consuming skin and tissue. This fire was internal, rewriting her at the cellular level. Her blood turned to molten silver in her arteries. Her bones felt like they were simultaneously shattering and reforming. Her heart stuttered, beating too fast, then too slow, then skipping beats entirely as it tried to decide whether to keep functioning or surrender to death. She screamed, couldn't stop screaming. The sound tore from her throat raw and animalistic. Lucian caught her as she fell, his arms wrapping around her convulsing body, holding her through the agony. 3 days, he said urgently, his lips against her ear. The transformation takes 3 days. Stay conscious if you can. Fight through the pain. Anchor yourself to my voice. I'll be here. I swear I'll be here every moment. But Catherine wouldn't wait 3 days. She attacked while Lucian was vulnerable, distracted, cradling Adelaide. Her claws, extended now to something more like talons, raked across Lucian's back, tearing through muscle to scrape against spine. 4 parallel gashes that would have killed a human instantly. Lucian went down hard, Adelaide tumbling from his arms to hit the floor in a tangle of limbs and continued screaming. Through the haze of transformation pain, Adelaide watched Catherine stand over Lucian, triumphant and terrible and utterly without mercy. Did you really think you could escape me? Catherine purred, placing one delicate foot on Lucian's chest, pinning him. Did you think love would save you? That this scarred little mortal would be your redemption? You're mine, Lucian. You've always been mine. You always will be mine. And now I'll kill her slowly, make you watch her transformation fail, watch her body reject the change and die in agony, then keep you alive for another 3 centuries of perfect, exquisite misery. We'll start the game over. You'll learn again that hope is poison. She raised her hand for the killing blow, talons aimed at Lucian's heart. And Adelaide, fueled by transformation pain and righteous fury and 2 months of learning what it meant to be seen and valued, grabbed a shard of mirror glass from the floor and drove it through Catherine's ankle with all her remaining human strength, severing the Achilles tendon completely. Catherine shrieked, a sound that shattered the remaining intact windows, stumbling backward. In that single heartbeat of distraction, Lucian surged upward with 300 years of accumulated rage finally unleashed and tore Catherine's throat out with his bare hands. Not with fangs, with fingers, ripping through supernatural flesh like it was tissue paper. Blood sprayed in arterial arcs across the conservatory. Not red like human blood, but something darker, thicker. Black around the edges like it had already begun to rot. Catherine gasped, clutching her ruined throat, trying to hold herself together. But even that wasn't enough to kill something 400 years old. She staggered backward, already beginning to heal, flesh crawling together across the massive wound. "The heart!" Mrs. Talbot shouted from the doorway, where she'd been watching in frozen horror. She threw something that spun end over end through the air, a wooden stake, ancient and carved with symbols Adelaide didn't recognize. Protective wards. Binding magic. "You have to destroy the heart. It's the only way to make it permanent." Lucian caught the stake with inhuman precision and moved with 300 years of accumulated rage and grief and loneliness channeled into single-minded purpose. He tackled Catherine to the ground, pinning her with his weight despite her superior age and strength, and drove the stake through her chest with brutal, methodical precision. Not quick, not merciful. He made sure it hurt. Catherine's screams split the night, agony and disbelief and rage that she could be defeated again, could be killed again by the progeny she'd tormented for centuries. Her body convulsed, heels drumming against the floor. Blood poured from the wound. Not regular blood, but something black and viscous as tar. Poison from centuries of accumulated cruelty finally being released. "You can't kill me," she choked out, blood bubbling from her lips. "I always come back. I always survive. I'm eternal." "Not this time." Lucian twisted the stake, driving it deeper, ensuring it pierced completely through to the floor beneath. "Mrs. Talbot, the consecrated fire, now." The old woman was already moving, pulling a bottle from her apron pocket and hurling it with surprising accuracy. It shattered against Catherine's convulsing body, releasing liquid that looked like oil but smelled like frankincense and myrrh. Holy oil, blessed by someone with enough genuine faith to make it burn vampires from the inside out. Catherine ignited. She burned like something that wanted to burn, like she'd been waiting centuries for this purification. Blue flames with white centers consumed her from within, burning through supernatural flesh that shouldn't burn, turning centuries of accumulated malice into ash and smoke. Her screams faded from words to sounds to silence as her vocal cords turned to carbon. The flames burned hotter, brighter, until Adelaide had to close her eyes against the glare even through her transformation agony. When she finally looked again, nothing remained but a pile of gray ash surrounding the stake. Proof that Catherine had finally, truly, permanently died. Lucian stood over the ashes, breathing hard despite not needing air, covered in blood both black and red, Catherine's and his own, and Adelaide's. For a long moment, he simply stared at the remains of his maker, the vampire who'd tortured him for centuries, who'd shaped him into what he was through cruelty and abandonment. Then he turned to Adelaide, who lay writhing on the floor, still caught in transformation agony, and something in his expression broke completely. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, gathering her back into his arms with infinite gentleness, despite his injuries. "I'm so sorry. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. You were supposed to have time, preparation, ritual." His voice cracked. "Hold on. Just hold on for me. 3 days. You can survive 3 days because you survived fire, and you survived 12 years of invisibility, and you survived choosing to love a monster. Hold on." Adelaide tried to speak, but managed only a whimper. The pain was reshaping her, killing her cell by cell, bringing her back as something new and terrible and powerful. Every nerve screaming, every bone breaking and reforming, every organ shutting down and restarting with new immortal purpose. "Take her to the chamber," Mrs. Talbot said quietly, already moving to clean blood from ancient floors, to sweep Catherine's ashes into a container that would be scattered across running water and consecrated ground, ensuring no resurrection this time. 3 days until she wakes, 3 days to see if the transformation takes, or if her body rejects the change. Lucien lifted Adelaide with inhuman strength, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. As he carried her toward the underground chamber, Adelaide caught fragmented glimpses through the haze of pain. The ruined conservatory that had been their sanctuary, the pile of ashes that used to be Catherine, Mrs. Talbot's weathered face creased with concern and fierce protectiveness, the candles still burning despite the carnage. She'd chosen this, chosen him, chosen to become something the world would call monster, rather than watch the man she loved die protecting her. And as consciousness finally began to slip away under the weight of transformation agony, Adelaide's last coherent thought was a desperate prayer. "Please let me survive this. Please let me wake up still myself. Please let me be strong enough to be his equal, not his victim." The darkness took her fully, and the true transformation began. 3 days of dying by inches while Lucien held her hand and whispered promises into the dark. Pain. Adelaide floated in an ocean of pain that had no shores, no ending, no relief. Time lost all meaning in the dark. Sometimes she was aware of Lucien's voice reading poetry, Keats and Byron and Shelley, words about mortality and transcendence that felt like prophecy now. Sometimes she felt his cool hand gripping hers, thumb stroking across her scarred knuckles in endless repetition. Sometimes she heard Mrs. Talbot's efficient movements, changing blood-soaked linens, bringing fresh bottles of blood for when Adelaide woke and needed to feed immediately. But mostly, there was just pain. Her body dying cell by cell, her bones breaking and reforming with new supernatural density. Her heart stopping and starting and stopping again as it learned to beat only when she willed it to. Her organs shutting down one by one, lungs last, taking a final breath she didn't know would be her final breath until hours later when she realized she'd forgotten to inhale again and didn't need to. She dreamed of fire, both fires, the original burning that scarred her at 11 and the transformation fire currently remaking her from the inside out. In her fever dreams, they merged into a single apocalyptic blaze, and she couldn't tell which flames were memory and which were current agony. On what she later learned was the second day, Adelaide became aware of her body's changes in terrifying detail, her fingernails falling out, new ones growing in harder and sharper, her teeth loosening and shifting, canines elongating into proper fangs, her skin tone draining to alabaster, the scars remaining but taking on an almost luminous quality against her new pallor. Her senses exploding outward, suddenly hearing conversations 3 floors away, smelling blood in Mrs. Talbot's veins from across the room, tasting copper on air that held no visible moisture. Through it all, Lucien's voice, constant, unwavering, a tether keeping her from dissolving entirely into the pain. "You're doing so well, love, better than I did. I broke everything in reach during my transformation. Furniture, windows, 3 of Catherine's ribs when she tried to restrain me. But you're fighting through it with dignity I didn't possess." His voice trembled. "I know it hurts. I know you want it to end. But you're almost there. One more day. Just one more day, and then you'll wake up strong enough that fire could never touch you again." On the 3rd day, 72 hours after transformation began, Adelaide's body went completely still. No breath, no heartbeat, no movement whatsoever. For 5 endless minutes, she lay like a corpse. Lucien held her hand and didn't breathe either, waiting with 300-year patience born of watching countless people die. Then Adelaide's eyes snapped open, not gradually, not peacefully. She surged upright with a gasp that didn't need air, pure reflex, muscle memory from 23 years of human breathing. Her eyes, when they focused, were no longer the brown they'd been. Now they were gray-blue, almost colorless, catching light like mirror glass. And she was so hungry. The hunger wasn't metaphorical. It was a physical thing. A beast living in her chest where her heart used to beat regularly, clawing at her from the inside. Her gums ached where her fangs had descended fully. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Every cell in her body screamed for blood, warm, fresh, pumping directly from a living source. Lucian was there instantly, pressing a crystal glass to her lips. The blood inside was cold, stored blood, days old, lacking the vital spark of life. But Adelaide's body didn't care. She drank without thinking, gulping it down in desperate swallows, feeling it coat her throat and ease the burning. When the glass was empty, clarity returned like someone had turned on lights in a dark room. Adelaide looked at her hands, still scarred from the fire, the familiar landscape of damaged tissue she knew by touch. But now, her skin was pale as moonlight, translucent almost, veins visible like blue rivers beneath alabaster. She flexed her fingers experimentally and watched the glass she still held crack from the pressure, spiderwebbing into 1,000 fractures. She was strong, impossibly, supernaturally strong. "I'm a vampire," she said aloud, testing how the words felt in her mouth. Her voice was different, still hers, but with an additional musical quality, like she was speaking in harmony with herself. "You are." Lucian watched her carefully, body tensed to restrain her if the first hunger turned violent, if she tried to attack Mrs. Talbot or bolt for the surface to hunt. "How do you feel?" Adelaide took inventory. No heartbeat. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt nothing, just stillness where rhythm used to live. No breath. She experimented with not inhaling and discovered she could go indefinitely without air, that breathing was now optional rather than mandatory. Senses so sharp she could hear mice in the walls, smell old blood in the stones, taste minerals in the underground air. Strength that made her former body feel like it had been made of paper and wishes. "Powerful," she admitted, the word coming out with mixed wonder and horror. "And wrong, like I'm wearing someone else's skin, like I'm a hermit crab that climbed into a shell that doesn't quite fit." That feeling fades. Lucian's voice held old grief, the weight of his own transformation 3 centuries past. "In a year, maybe 2, you'll remember human Adelaide like a distant dream, something that happened to someone else. In a decade, you'll barely recall what heartbeat felt like, what sunlight on your skin felt like, what it meant to need food and sleep and air. The human parts fade until all that's left is this." He gestured to himself. "The eternal parts. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more time to prepare," he continued, voice breaking slightly. "Sorry I couldn't do this properly, with ritual and ceremony and the 3 nights of education I'd planned. Catherine forced my hand and I—" Adelaide kissed him. It felt profoundly different now. Both of them cold, both of them still. No pulse to quicken, no warmth to share. But also more intense, more connected. She could taste centuries in his blood. She realized with shock that traces of his blood still lingered on her tongue from the transformation. Could feel the metaphysical thread binding them as vampire and progeny, maker and maid. The connection Catherine had twisted into chain and collar, but which felt more like a tether keeping Adelaide from floating away into the vast emptiness of immortality. Could sense his emotions like they were her own, his relief that she'd survived, his guilt about the rushed transformation, his terror that she'd wake up hating him for stealing her mortality. When she pulled back, Lucian looked stunned, hopeful and terrified in equal measure. "I chose this," Adelaide said firmly, needing him to understand, to believe, to stop carrying guilt for a choice she'd made freely. "Maybe faster than we planned. Maybe without the careful ritual you'd designed. But I chose you, Lucian. I chose us. I chose becoming something that could stand beside you instead of behind you, that could fight instead of hide, that could be your equal instead of your responsibility. She flexed her new hands, watching the tendons move beneath translucent skin, testing her supernatural strength. And I'd choose it again, every time, in every timeline. Given the same circumstances, I'd make the same choice. So stop apologizing for giving me what I asked for, even knowing you'll never see sunlight again? Lucian's voice was careful, testing. Never age? Never have the human life you deserved? Marriage, children, growing old with someone who could grow old beside you? I had 23 years of human life. 12 of them spent invisible and locked away, treated like shameful cargo the Ashfords couldn't dispose of, but couldn't bear to acknowledge. You gave me 2 months of actually living, of being seen, valued, wanted, loved. She cupped his face with her new strong hands. Now we have eternity to figure out what comes next. And that's worth the price of sunlight. Lucian pulled her into his arms properly, and Adelaide heard something that might have been a sob if vampires could cry. But they couldn't. No tears, no heartbeat, no warm blood to fuel human responses. Just this cold embrace and the knowledge that they'd chosen each other despite or because of everything that made them monstrous. I don't deserve you, Lucian whispered into her hair. Probably not, Adelaide agreed with newfound honesty that vampirism seemed to encourage. But you're stuck with me anyway, for better or worse, for eternity, so you'd better get used to it. She breathed in his scent, old books and winter nights, and something darker now, blood scent that called to her new vampire nature. Now teach me. Show me how to be this, how to survive without becoming Catherine, how to choose ethics when instinct screams for easy cruelty. You could never become her. Lucian pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Catherine was made by someone crueler than she was. Trauma begetting trauma in an endless cycle. But you... He touched her scarred cheek with infinite gentleness. You survived fire and chose compassion anyway. Survived 12 years of cruelty and chose to see beauty in a monster. That core of who you are doesn't disappear with transformation. It strengthens. I hope you're right, but I still need the rules, the boundaries. How do I know when I'm losing control? What are the warning signs that I'm becoming dangerous? Lucian's expression turned serious, slipping into teacher mode. Then we start with the most important rule, the one that separates us from monsters. Never feed from the unwilling. No matter how hungry you get, no matter how easy it would be, no matter how much the prey's fear smells like dinner bell. Consent isn't just ethical law, it's what keeps us human in the ways that matter. Show me, Adelaide said. Teach me everything. I want to do this right. They spent the next week in the underground chambers. Lucian teaching, Adelaide learning with the quick efficiency of someone who'd survived by learning fast. How to move with vampire speed. Adelaide discovered she could cross the chamber in a blur, faster than human eyes could track. How to extend her senses. She learned to filter the overwhelming sensory input, focusing on specific sounds or scents instead of drowning in everything at once. How to control the hunger that lurked beneath every moment, the beast in her chest that wanted fresh blood and didn't care about ethics. How to feed from bottles without craving the warmth of blood straight from a living vein, the hardest lesson, requiring constant vigilance. Lucian taught her to hunt animals for practice, taking blood without killing, blurring the creature's memory with vampire compulsion so it wouldn't fear the next night. Taught her the limits of her new strength. She could crush stone, bend iron, throw grown men like toys if she needed to defend herself. Taught her vampire history, the lineages that mattered, the territories claimed by older creatures, the politics of immortal society. And Adelaide learned that being a vampire meant constant vigilance. Every moment required choice. Every hunger spike demanded conscious control. Every interaction with humans meant carefully maintaining the mask of humanity, remembering to breathe, to blink, to move at human speeds, to not react with inhuman reflexes when startled. "You're doing remarkably well," Mrs. Talbot observed one evening, bringing fresh supplies to the chamber. The old woman showed no fear of Adelaide's transformation, treating her with the same matter-of-fact care she'd shown before. Most new vampires have. Incidents in their first month, loss of control, accidental injuries, sometimes accidental kills. Incidents? Adelaide looked at Lucian, who had the grace to appear embarrassed. "The master went through 6 chamber doors in his first year," Mrs. Talbot continued with slight amusement, "breaking them during hunger rages when Catherine would withhold blood to teach him discipline. He also destroyed most of the furniture, cracked the foundation walls in 3 places, and once threw Catherine herself through a window, though she deserved that one." "You never told me that part," Adelaide said to Lucian. "I'm not proud of my early years." He shrugged with centuries-old chagrin. "Catherine left me to figure it out alone, and I made mistakes, hurt people, never killed them. I had that much control. But I frightened them, injured them, took more blood than I should have. It took decades to develop the control I have now, the restraint, the ethics." "Then I'm lucky," Adelaide said simply. "I have you. I don't have to learn alone in the dark. I have a teacher who cares whether I become a monster." But learning in isolation wasn't sustainable. After 2 weeks underground, Adelaide began to feel the walls closing in. The same claustrophobia she'd felt in her locked room at the Ashfords, just dressed in different architecture. "I need to hunt," she admitted one evening, pacing the chamber like a caged animal. "Not for blood. We have bottles, I'm feeding fine. But for air, space, movement. I need to move, to run, to use this strength outside these walls before I start breaking things, just to feel like I have any agency." Lucian looked up from the book he was reading, some centuries-old philosophy text Adelaide hadn't gotten to yet. Already? Most new vampires stay underground for months, afraid of their own power. "I didn't survive fire and 12 years of captivity to trade one cage for another." Adelaide's voice was sharp with frustration. "I'm going stir-crazy down here, Lucian. Every night I wake up and the walls are closer, and I can hear everything. Conversations 3 floors up, mice in the walls, your heartbeat that doesn't beat anymore, my own thoughts getting louder because there's nothing to distract from them. I need out. Please." "The moors are dangerous for a new vampire," Lucian said carefully. "Too exposed, too easy to encounter travelers on the roads. Too much temptation if you smell fresh blood while you're still learning control. And if you lose control out there, if you hurt someone, then come with me." Adelaide crossed to him, taking his hands. "Keep me in check. Stop me if I go feral. Be my safeguard. But please, Lucian, I can't stay locked underground forever. I didn't choose immortality to spend it in a tomb." Lucian studied her, really looked at her, reading her body language, her desperation, her genuine need for space and freedom. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. But we go to the wild places. No villages, no roads, no travelers. Just you, me, and the night. And if I say we're going back, you don't argue. Agreed?" "Agreed." They left the estate after midnight, when even the most dedicated poachers were home in bed. The moment Adelaide stepped outside, she gasped, not because she needed air, but from pure sensory overload. Everything was so much more. The moon was brighter, casting shadows so sharp they looked painted on the ground. The wind carried 1,000 scents, heather and whetstone and rabbit burrows and fox dens, and the distant salt smell of ocean 40 miles away. The stars overhead blazed like she'd never seen them, each one distinct, some of them already dead, but their light still traveling. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It is. But Adelaide—" Lucian touched her shoulder. "Remember what we practiced. If you smell human blood, you tell me immediately. If the hunger spikes and you feel control slipping, you tell me. If anything feels wrong or too intense or like you're going to lose yourself, you tell me. I can't help if I don't know you're struggling. I promise. Then Lucian smiled, genuinely, joyfully, and said, "Run." Adelaide ran. She moved with inhuman speed, faster than thought, faster than human eyes could track. The world blurred into colors and moonlight. Wind whipped through her hair. Her new body moved with predatory grace she'd never possessed as a human, every motion efficient and powerful. She laughed with pure joy, the sound carrying across the empty moors, and heard Lucian laugh behind her, keeping pace easily with his 3 centuries of practice. They ran for miles, covering ground that would have taken hours to walk in mere minutes. Adelaide felt truly free for the first time since her transformation, maybe the first time since before the fire. No locked doors, no pitying glances, no shame about her scars or her strength or her nature, just movement and moonlight and the vampire she loved running beside her. They hunted deer for the practice of it, Lucian showing her how to catch them mid-stride, how to take blood without killing, how to blur the animal's memory with vampire compulsion so it would simply wander away confused rather than terrified. "Gently," he instructed as Adelaide held a trembling doe. "Just a little. Enough to ease the hunger, but not enough to weaken her. She has fawns to feed. Her life matters beyond what she can give you." Adelaide took blood carefully, tasting the difference between bottle blood and living blood. This was warmer, richer, almost overwhelming in its vitality. The hunger beast in her chest purred with satisfaction, wanting more, demanding more. But she stopped when Lucian signaled, releasing the doe and watching her bound away into the night. "How do you feel?" Lucian asked. "Powerful, in control, good." Adelaide wiped blood from her lips. "Is it always this intense, feeding from living things?" "It never stops being intense. You just get better at handling the intensity without losing yourself to it." Lucian took her hand. "Come. There's more I want to show you." He led her to the highest hill for miles, where they could see the entire valley spread below. The Ashford estate like a toy castle, villages twinkling with lamplight, the dark ribbon of river cutting through it all. "From up here, humans look like candle flames," Lucian said quietly. "Brief and bright and beautiful, and we're the darkness between the stars, eternal, cold, watching them burn. That's bleak. That's honest. But it doesn't have to be lonely. Not anymore." He turned to face her fully. "You asked what happens now. This is part of it. Learning to exist in the spaces between human lives. Learning to watch them burn and not become bitter about the beauty we can't have." Adelaide stood beside him and watched the valley breathe, chimneys smoking, lights moving behind windows. The pulse of human life continuing, oblivious to the predators on the hilltop. "I don't feel bitter," she realized. "I feel grateful. Is that strange? To be grateful for something that cost me sunlight and heartbeat and the future I'd imagined? It's not strange. It's survival." Lucian pulled her close. "You're choosing to find beauty in what you have instead of mourning what you lost. That's how we survive eternity without going mad." They stayed on the hilltop until nearly dawn, talking about everything and nothing, her questions about vampire society, his stories from 3 centuries of existence, their plans for the future, their fears about what immortality might do to them across decades and centuries. And when they finally returned to the estate, as the sky began to lighten with pre-dawn gray, Adelaide felt more herself than she had since waking, more settled in her new skin, more certain that she could be this thing, this vampire, without losing the core of who Adelaide was. "Thank you," she said, as Lucian sealed them back into the underground chamber for the day. "I needed that, the space, the freedom. The reminder that immortality isn't just imprisonment with fancier walls. I know. Lucian pulled her close, and they settled together on the bed where she'd spent 3 days dying and being reborn. I remember the claustrophobia of new immortality, the sense that eternity stretched ahead like an endless hallway with no doors, that feeling of being trapped in your own power. It gets better? It gets different. You learn to find joy in small things, a perfectly brewed cup of tea you don't need to drink, a book you've read 100 times finding new meaning, the way moonlight hits frost, the sound of someone you love breathing, even though neither of you needs to breathe. He kissed her forehead. We'll find balance, Adelaide, safety and freedom, control and wildness, together. Adelaide rested her head against his chest, where a heartbeat used to be, and felt for the first time that maybe eternity wouldn't be a burden after all. Maybe it would be an adventure. Maybe it would be exactly what they made of it. Together. 6 months after Adelaide's transformation, they stood in the estate's gallery as Mrs. Talbot supervised the packing of centuries of collections into wooden crates bound for London. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" the old woman asked, carefully wrapping one of Lucian's portraits in protective cloth before securing it with twine. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, but Adelaide could hear the tremor of emotion beneath the practical movements. "This has been your sanctuary for 200 years, Master, your refuge, your home." "It was my hiding place," Lucian corrected gently, watching Adelaide move through the gallery one last time, studying paintings that held stories she now had eternity to learn. "My tomb that happened to have windows. Adelaide made me realize I've been surviving, not living, existing, not thriving, watching centuries pass instead of actually experiencing them. It's time to change that." Adelaide paused before Lucian's portrait, the young man with consumption who never imagined he'd become immortal, whose desperate choice would echo through 300 years. The painted eyes looked so hopeful, so terrified, so beautifully human. "Do you still recognize him?" she asked, touching the frame. "The person you were before Catherine? Before immortality? Before 3 centuries of accumulated grief and loneliness?" Lucian joined her, studying his mortal face with the complex expression of someone looking at a stranger who used to be him. Some days, he was terrified of death, so eager to live that he'd accept any bargain, any price. He didn't understand that immortality without purpose is just elegant suffering, that living forever doesn't mean anything if you're not living for something. He turned to Adelaide, taking her hands in his. "But you gave me purpose again, reason to want centuries instead of just enduring them. You made me remember what it feels like to look forward to sunset instead of dreading another night of endless empty hours." No pressure then. But Adelaide smiled, squeezing his cold hands with her matching cold ones. "Just be responsible for giving 300 years of existence meaning. Simple. You already have, from the moment you took my hand that first night instead of running, from the moment you chose to see a person beneath the monster." They'd spent 6 months preparing for this moment, 6 months of Adelaide mastering her new vampire nature, learning control, building strength, testing her limits against Lucian's centuries of experience. They'd traveled to London twice already, Adelaide seeing the vast, sprawling city for the first time through vampire eyes that could pick out individual faces in crowds of thousands, that could read newspapers from across streets, that could see beauty in the filth and chaos of humanity pressed together. They'd found a townhouse in a respectable but not fashionable neighborhood, old enough to have character, private enough to have underground chambers, large enough to house the library Lucian had been quietly maintaining there for decades. 3 stories above ground, 2 below. Room enough for a vampire's requirements and a growing collection of rescued souls. Because that had been Adelaide's idea, formed during her 3rd month of immortality. If Catherine made you and abandoned you, how many others did she do that to? How many newly made vampires are stumbling through their first years alone, trying to figure out ethics and control without any guidance, becoming monsters because no one taught them they could be anything else. And Lucien had looked at her with something like awe and said, "At least 17 that I know of. Probably more. She was prolific in her cruelty. Then we find them. We help them. We teach them what you've taught me, that vampires can choose ethics, that immortality doesn't require cruelty, that consent matters more than convenience." So London made sense. A city large enough to hide several vampires, diverse enough that strange new residents wouldn't attract undue attention, connected enough to vampire networks that word would spread about the couple willing to help lost immortals find their way. "The carriage is ready, Master," Mrs. Talbot announced, finishing the last crate. "I've sent the most precious items ahead, the journals, the oldest books, the artifacts that wouldn't survive rough handling. The rest will follow throughout the next year as we close down the estate properly." "Will you visit?" Adelaide asked, moving to embrace the old woman. "Once we're settled, you've become family to me these past 6 months. I don't want to lose that." Mrs. Talbot's eyes misted, one of the few advantages of not being vampire. She could still cry. "If you'll have me, Miss Adelaide. I'm too old to start over with new employers, and truthfully," her voice caught, "you two are the closest thing I've had to family in 40 years. Master Lucien gave me a life when I thought mine was over. I'd follow him anywhere, follow both of you anywhere." Adelaide held her carefully, mindful of her new strength, mindful that this fragile human woman had shown her more kindness than anyone besides Lucien. "Then family you are, forever, for as long as you want us." They loaded the carriage as sunset painted the moors in shades of amber and gold. Adelaide paused at the conservatory doors, now repaired, the glass replaced, the plants slowly recovering. The place where she'd become immortal, where Catherine had died, where everything had changed. "Regrets?" Lucien asked, coming to stand beside her. "About the transformation? Never. About Catherine? No, she deserved what she got. About leaving?" Adelaide considered. "No. This place holds memories, good and terrible. But memories don't require physical space to exist. We carry them with us." She turned to face the estate one last time, the building that had imprisoned her and freed her, that had been her cage and her salvation. "Goodbye," she whispered. "Thank you for the books and the mirrors and the nights spent learning what it means to be seen. But I'm ready for what comes next now." They left at sunset, traveling by private carriage through countryside Adelaide had never seen by night. Everything looked different now with vampire senses, sharper, more vivid, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. She could see individual leaves on trees they passed, count stars in constellations, hear conversations in farmhouses a mile away. "Nervous?" Lucien asked, watching her study the landscape with new eyes. "Excited, terrified, both." Adelaide laced her fingers with his, the familiar gesture of connection they'd maintained through her transformation. "What do we do now, in London, in eternity? What's our purpose beyond just existing?" "Whatever we choose," Lucien smiled. "We could patronize artists, help them create beauty the world needs. Collect more books, preserve knowledge others would let burn, help other vampires learn ethics, build a community of immortals who choose compassion, track down Catherine's other victims and ensure they're surviving their immortality instead of drowning in it." He squeezed her hand. "Or we could simply exist, read, travel, love each other. There's no rule book for eternity, Adelaide. We write it as we go, make it up as we survive it." Adelaide thought about that. Infinite possibility, endless time, no more locked doors or predetermined paths, just choice, night after night after night. "I want to help others," she decided firmly. "People like me, scarred, hidden, told they're less than whole. People like you were, newly made vampires abandoned to figure it out alone. I want them to know that damage doesn't define you, that you can survive transformation and still be worth loving, that choosing ethics makes you stronger, not weaker. Then that's what we'll do. Lucian kissed her scarred temple. We'll find them, show them, build something that lasts beyond just the two of us. You're going to change the world, Adelaide Corvus. I can feel it. You're going to save people I didn't even know needed saving. Adelaide Corvus, she repeated softly, testing how the name felt. Are you asking? I'm saying I want to build this eternity with you, as partners, as equals, as family. Lucian's voice turned tentative. If you'll have me? If you'd take my name and everything that comes with it, the legacy, the complications, the truth that being a Corvus means choosing the harder path every night. I'd take everything you offer. Adelaide cupped his face with both hands. Name, eternity, purpose, love. The hard path that means something instead of the easy path that goes nowhere. That's worth any price. That's worth sunlight and heartbeat and the mortal future I used to imagine. The carriage rolled through moonlit countryside as two vampires held each other, both of them changed by fire. Adelaide by literal flames that scarred her body. Lucian by the burning transformation of love rediscovered after centuries of loneliness, thinking he'd never find someone who understood. Tell me about London, Adelaide said, after they'd traveled in comfortable silence for a while. What should I expect? How does vampire society work in a city that large? Lucian settled back, pulling her close against his side. London has perhaps 30 vampires that I know of, maybe more. The city's large enough that careful immortals can remain hidden indefinitely. There's no formal government, no king or council, but there are territories. Unspoken agreements about hunting grounds, feeding territories, who has claim to which humans. That sounds complicated. It can be, but most London vampires are old enough to have learned restraint, ethics, the value of not drawing attention. The ones who couldn't learn those lessons are dust now, killed by hunters, by other vampires, or by their own lack of control leading to exposure. He paused. There are exceptions, of course. Young vampires like you'll be, newly made and struggling, those are the ones we'll help. Have you told anyone we're coming? I've sent letters to 3 vampires I trust, Marcus, Eleanor, and James. They're part of an informal network that tries to help lost immortals. They'll spread word that we're offering sanctuary and education. Lucien's expression turned serious. But Adelaide, you need to understand, not every vampire will welcome what we're trying to build. Some believe in the old ways, that vampires should be predators, period, that ethics are human weakness we should shed with our mortality. They'll see us as threats to their way of life. Let them. Adelaide's voice held steel. I didn't survive fire and transformation to let other people's cruelty dictate how I exist. We'll build our sanctuary, help who we can help, and let the others stay bitter in their darkness. Lucian laughed, genuine and surprised. You're fiercer as a vampire than I expected. I was fierce as a human. Fire just made it visible. Immortality made it undeniable. 3 years later, the London townhouse had become something unexpected, something beautiful, something that scared Adelaide with its fragile importance. A sanctuary. Word had spread quietly through vampire networks, passed in whispered conversations, in dark corners of theaters, and behind closed doors of gentlemen's clubs, about the couple who helped new immortals transition, who taught consent and control instead of abandoning their progeny to figure it out alone through trial and bloody error, who believed, genuinely believed, lived as if they believed, that vampires could be ethical, could survive without becoming monsters, could choose compassion over cruelty night after night after night. Adelaide stood in their library, twice the size of the original collection now, expanded with purchases and donations and rescued volumes from estate sales, counseling a newly turned woman who wept over the loss of her humanity. The woman couldn't have been more than 19 when she was turned, and her maker had disappeared the night after her transformation, leaving her to wake alone in a cellar with no explanation, no guidance, nothing but hunger and horror. "It gets easier," Adelaide said gently, showing her scarred hands, proof that damage could be survived, that transformation didn't erase who you fundamentally were. "You'll always carry what you were, the memories, the values, the person you built across 19 mortal years. But you'll build something new from those ruins, something stronger, something that chooses how to exist instead of being driven by pure instinct." "How?" the woman whispered, her voice breaking. "How do I stop wanting to hurt people? How do I stop seeing every human as food? How do I look at my family, my mother, my sisters, and not want to drink them dry? By choosing, every night, every moment, who you want to be, how you want to exist, what matters enough to survive for." Adelaide pulled up a chair, settling in for what she knew would be a long conversation. "And by finding people who see your worth, who remind you that change isn't erasure, that becoming a vampire doesn't make you a monster, your choices do that, and you can choose differently." She'd had this conversation, or variations of it, 17 times in the past 3 years. 17 newly made vampires who'd found their door, who'd heard rumors of sanctuary, who'd stumbled through London's dark streets, desperate and dangerous, until someone pointed them toward the townhouse where Mercy lived. 17 lives potentially saved from Catherine's fate, from becoming cruel because cruelty was all they'd known, from choosing monstrosity because no one taught them humanity was still possible. Lucian appeared in the doorway, 3 more vampires behind him, his latest rescues, all of them abandoned by cruel makers, all of them desperate for guidance. One was barely conscious, held upright by Lucian's strength, clothes torn and blood-stained from what looked like a feeding frenzy that had gone too far. Adelaide met his eyes across the room, and they shared a look of complete understanding, the wordless communication of partners who'd worked together 3 years, building something impossible. This was their purpose. This was what eternity meant, helping others find light in their darkness, teaching them that monsters were made by choice, not transformation, showing them that survival could include ethics. "Mrs. Talbot's preparing the recovery room," Lucian said quietly, his voice pitched for vampire hearing. "This one fed from at least 5 humans tonight, not killed them, thank God, but came close. He's feral with guilt and hunger both." Adelaide nodded, finishing with the young woman, giving her a list of rules to follow, a schedule for checking in, a promise that she wasn't alone anymore, before moving to help with the new arrival. The next hours were a blur of controlled chaos, getting the feral vampire secured without hurting him, feeding him stored blood until the hunger madness faded, talking him down from the ledge of guilt-driven self-destruction that claimed so many young vampires who hurt someone accidentally. By the time dawn approached and Adelaide could finally rest, she was exhausted in the way vampires could be exhausted, not physically tired, but emotionally drained, spiritually depleted, running on empty reserves of patience and compassion. Lucian found her in the library, staring at nothing, processing the night's events. "Rough night," he observed, settling beside her. "They're all rough nights lately. We're taking in more vampires than we can properly help. Training them, teaching them, keeping them from killing someone. It's becoming a full-time occupation for both of us." Adelaide rubbed her face. "I'm not complaining. This is important work. But sometimes I wonder if we're actually making a difference or just putting bandages on a wound that needs surgery." We're making a difference. 17 vampires who might have become like Catherine, who might have built empires of cruelty, are instead learning to be ethical. That's 17 fewer monsters in the world. Lucian took her hand. "But you're right that we can't sustain this alone. We need help. More people who understand what we're trying to build. More vampires teaching vampires. And humans who understand. People like Mrs. Talbot, mortal allies who can move in daylight, who can help in ways we can't." He paused. "I've been thinking about this for months. What if we formalized it? created an actual organization instead of just the two of us scrambling to help everyone who shows up? Adelaide considered. What would that look like? A network, vampires across England, maybe across Europe eventually, who share our values, who commit to ethical feeding, to helping newly made immortals, to not being the monsters humans fear. We could establish safe houses in multiple cities, train teachers, create resources, written guides, rules, support systems. That's ambitious. So was surviving your transformation. So was killing Catherine. So was everything we've done the past 3 years. Lucian's expression turned intense. We could change what it means to be vampire, Adelaide, not just for 17 lost souls, but for hundreds, thousands, eventually. We could build something that outlasts even us. Adelaide felt something kindle in her chest where her heart used to beat. Not hope exactly, but purpose, direction. The sense that eternity might mean something beyond just endless nights of the same struggle. Let's do it, she decided, but carefully, with planning. And only with vampires we trust absolutely, because one bad actor in a network like that could destroy everything we're trying to build. Lucian smiled, the expression that still made Adelaide's undead heart feel like it remembered how to flutter. We'll start small. The 3 I mentioned, Marcus, Eleanor, James, they're already doing similar work in their territories. We'll connect them, share resources, build from there. And what do we call this organization? I thought perhaps. Lucian paused, considering. The Covenant. A promise between vampires to choose ethics over ease. To be something better than what we were made to be. The Covenant, Adelaide repeated, testing how it sounded. I like it. It sounds permanent, important, like something worth building carefully. They sat together in the library as dawn painted the windows with light they couldn't enjoy, planning the future of vampire ethics, designing an organization that would outlive them both, building meaning from immortality's endless hours. And Adelaide realized this was what she'd chosen, not just Lucian, though she'd choose him again every night. Not just immortality, though she'd never regret that transformation, but this, purpose, meaning, the chance to change what it meant to survive as a monster. Worth every price. Worth sunlight and heartbeat and the mortal future she'd traded away. Worth it all. 1 century later, Adelaide stood in the gallery of their Paris estate, adding a new portrait to the collection. A young vampire they'd helped last year, 23 years old when turned, struggling with the same questions Adelaide had struggled with, now thriving as an artist who painted the darkness with compassion. Her work hung beside others they'd saved over the decades, a century of faces, a century of lives rebuilt, evidence that their work mattered. The Covenant had grown beyond anything Adelaide had imagined that dawn in London. 3 vampires had become 30, then 300, then 3,000. They had safe houses in every major European city, teachers trained to help new vampires transition, resources published in 12 languages, a reputation that preceded them wherever they traveled. They'd saved some, lost some, made compromises they weren't proud of, made enemies among vampires who preferred the old ways of cruelty and power. But they'd built something real, something lasting, something that changed what it meant to be immortal. Lucian joined her, sliding an arm around her waist in the familiar gesture they'd maintained for 100 years. They'd spent decades together now, traveling through Europe, establishing sanctuaries, rewriting the rules of what vampires could be, loving each other with the kind of depth that only centuries could build. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. The question he still asked periodically, needing reassurance that she'd never blame him for stealing her mortality. Giving up humanity for this? For me? For an eternity of fighting battles that never fully end? Adelaide looked at the gallery, at evidence of purpose, at the community they'd built, at the legacy they were creating together that would outlive even their immortal lives. She thought about the thousands of vampires they'd helped across a century, the humans saved from becoming victims, the slow transformation of vampire society from predatory to potentially ethical. Then she looked at Lucien, still beautiful after 400 years total, still choosing ethics over ease every single night, still loving her with the intensity of someone who'd survived centuries of loneliness only to find exactly the right person to share eternity with. "Never," she said firmly, "not once, not even in my darkest moments. You gave me eternity. I gave us meaning. That's a fair trade." She kissed him there in the gallery, surrounded by evidence that love could resurrect even the damned, that scars, whether from fire or transformation or the accumulated wounds of living too long, were proof of survival, not defeat, that choosing ethics made you stronger, not weaker, that two broken things had built something transcendent from their shared wounds. And somewhere in the darkness outside, another lost vampire was finding their way to a Covenant safe house, would discover that sanctuary existed for those brave enough to seek it, would learn that monsters could choose to be merciful, that immortality didn't require cruelty, that being seen completely, scars and fangs and darkness and all, was the truest form of love. Adelaide and Lucien would hear about it eventually, would send resources, guidance, support, would add another face to their gallery of saved souls, would continue the work they'd started that night in the ruined conservatory when Adelaide chose transformation over helplessness. Because that was what eternity meant. Not endless existence, but endless purpose. Not just surviving, but building something worth surviving for. Outside, dawn approached, the light that would drive them underground for another day. But in their Paris sanctuary, in galleries and libraries and safe houses across Europe, their work continued, even while they slept. The Covenant operated around the clock. Daylight teams of human allies and nighttime teams of vampire teachers. A network of mercy spanning continents. Proof that monsters could choose differently. Proof that Adelaide Thorne, burned by fire at 11, transformed by love at 23, architect of vampire ethics at 123, had changed the world after all. Not despite her scars. Because of them. Because survival taught her strength. Because invisibility taught her to see others who were hidden. Because being broken taught her how to help others rebuild. And as Adelaide and Lucien descended to their underground chamber, holding hands the way they'd held hands that first night in the library, she felt something she'd never expected to feel in eternity. Complete. Not happy. Happiness was too simple for creatures who'd lived this long, who'd seen this much, who carried centuries of accumulated grief alongside their joy. But complete, whole, purposeful, loved. "Sleep well," Lucien whispered as they settled into their shared coffin. Not because vampires needed coffins, but because after a century together, they preferred waking up beside each other. "Dream of tomorrow," Adelaide whispered back, their traditional exchange. Because tomorrow was another night. Another chance to choose ethics over ease. Another opportunity to save someone who thought they were beyond saving. Another beginning. And eternity was built from beginnings. One night at a time. One choice at a time. One rescued vampire at a time. Forever. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned. Comment eternal if you choose forever for love that sees your soul completely. Like if you believe even monsters deserve a second chance at redemption through choice and compassion. And remember, every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. What they choose to do with that eternal life, that's what defines them. Choose wisely, choose compassionately, choose to be the light in someone else's darkness. Because darkness is eternal, but so is the choice to shine within it. The burned servant was hidden from the world, until the alpha vampire said, "You shine for me." A Blood and Mercy production. For those who survived fire and chose to burn brighter, for those who were called monsters and chose mercy anyway, for those who were hidden and chose to shine, this story is for you.